The hosts feel it would be a little unkind to present this podcast without just a word of friendly warning. We are about to unfold the story of Frankenstein, a man of science who sought to create a man after his own image without reckoning upon God. It is one of the strangest tales ever told. It deals with the two great mysteries of creation, life and death. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now's your chance to. Well, we've warned you. Hello and welcome once again to the Frankencast. I am the mad scientist Anthony Bowman. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm joined as always by
the still beating disembodied heart of Eric Velazquez. My pronouns are also he, him.
So, yeah, this week we are finally outside of the Universal Studios world and over to Toho Studios for Frankenstein Conquers the World. And boy, this movie, it is a wild ride.
From start to finish, right?
Yes. And the many finishes, or at least two different finishes. So, yeah, I think we talked about it last time at the end, but like this movie, as is common with non-American movies from this era, it has a handful of titles. It's been edited in a couple different ways, has several different like dubbings over time. So, depending on, there's a lot of different versions you might have seen. So the one that we watched is the original Japanese one, but the one that contained the alternate ending.
Yeah, I think that one originally appeared on television first. It didn't hit movie theaters initially because I think the theatrical version was one where Frankenstein gets swallowed up in an earthquake.
Yes. Yeah, so we'll I'm sure we'll get into that in a little more detail as we go. But yeah, this movie, Frankenstein Conquers the World, Frankenstein versus the World, Frankenstein versus Baragon, or Frankenstein versus, was it Giant Underground Dweller Baragon?
Yes, that would be Frankenstein kaiju Baragon.
Yeah. And then also Frankenstein versus the Devilfish, which I guess is referring to this alternate ending we're talking about, but I don't know why that got its own title, but it's among them.
Fascinating. All right, so we start off with the credits rolling over pictures of beakers and test tubes and just general science with some nice theatrical and creepy music.
Yeah, I definitely wrote science ! To describe the credits as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes right from there to like a really brief little scene of just a World War II battlefield in Germany, I guess just kind of setting the stage. And I mean, it's like a couple seconds, and then you're in like a science lab. So,
right.
Just to let you know, we're in World War II. That kind of let you know the time period.
Yeah, we've got barbed wire, machine gun fire sounds off in the distance, bombs exploding here and there. So yeah, we're setting up World War II is currently going on.
Yeah, and then we get the lab, and it's someone who, all intents and purposes, based on this movie, you would assume this is Dr. Frankenstein. He's not really. I think much later in the movie they refer to him as Dr. Rissendorf.
Mm-hmm.
But the lab, obviously, this being set during World War II, it's a little bit more modern than we've seen in the Universal movies. The beakers and everything look like stuff you've seen, in your science lab in high school or whatever. It's a little bit more modern equipment. But instantly, a bunch of soldiers break in, and
not just any soldiers, Anthony. These are not Nazis. Dealing with those guys again.
Yeah, so we got some Nazis, and they take this crate from the doctor that he's kind of lovingly sealed up right before they get there, and it's kind of a mystery as to what's in the crate. Although if you listen carefully, you'll hear this kind of rhythmic beating from inside the crate. I wonder what that could be.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. But also, did you notice that for the most part, that scene, no dialogue whatsoever. Everything was just action.
Yeah, it was interesting because, when I pressed play, it was I was trying to make sure, do I have the version that's
in Japanese or is this the English version? And like it takes a little bit before you find out because there's just no dialogue.
Yeah, apparently I didn't have the subtitles prepared quite right. So it was like, oh, okay. And then all of a sudden Japanese, but no subtitles. And I'm like, I messed up.
Yeah, because the first time you do hear dialogue, it's German and it is not subtitled. And that's still, a scene or two away.
Right.
But yeah, so as soon as the soldiers leave, Rissendorf just like smashes all his gear. So I don't know if it's like out of anger or like that he doesn't want this to be recreated. Like it's kind of unclear, but that's pretty much the last we see of him is just, for a while is just him like smashing all of his equipment.
Yeah, it does feel kind of like the Nazis just came in and stole all of his toys, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And so then we get like a couple scenes of submarines, of like crews in submarines. You got like a German crew talking. And then they kind of like meet up with a Japanese submarine and pass off this crate, which I thought was an interesting thing. So this movie was a co-production between Toho and American International Pictures in America, who, had sort of the deal. They were the ones that like, did the drastic recut of the first Godzilla movie and turned it into Godzilla King of the Monsters and everything. But they like were sort of more active on this one. It wasn't just like they bought the Toho movie and changed it, but like, for this movie being, made when it was, to have like Japanese and Americans sort of working together and like that, like they're dealing with a pretty touchy subject that was still pretty fresh,
Right. So
we've got like Japanese people allied with Nazis here in the movie, or like not working too closely, but like the Nazis are handing off this valuable secret box to the Japanese.
Yeah, this is what this takes, or this was actually released 20 years after the fact of the bombing of Hiroshima and everything like that. So I mean, yeah, that is still fresh in everyone's mind. So obviously it's pretty cool that they were able to bypass any grudges and just get these movies made. Yeah.
So then we get like you see there's like some cool sort of like map overlays over the ocean, like they kind of have these
right.
To show the path that the sub takes and everything. And we ultimately end up in a hospital where the soldiers...
Would that be Hiroshima Army Hospital?
Yeah. You might have heard of that place before.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the soldiers drop off this crate to a doctor, and the doctor's only in this one scene, but Takashi Shimura, he's like huge in Japanese movies at this time period. Like he's one of Akira Kurosawa's stock players. He's the main guy in Seven Samurai. He's in everything, and was also in the original Godzilla film as well, where he's sort of like the main scientist researching Godzilla. But I was kind of, and this movie is directed, we should say, by Ishiro Honda, who directed Godzilla and also was like, and he learned under Akira Kurosawa. So yeah, it's kind of cool that he just has this little part at least in this.
Yeah, there's some strong DNA going back here, and even with the American actor that we'll talk about here in a bit, who was apparently kind of like low-key Hollywood royalty to a degree, in that he had a lot of connections with like Elvis and James Dean and even Dennis Hopper.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the soldiers drop off the crate, and there's like this kind of neat conversation where the doctor's like, "I bet you're curious what you've been going to all this trouble to bring to me," and they're like, "Yes, we want to know." And in most things like this, they just be like, "You're just grunts, you don't get to see." But like he's like, "Yeah, let me show you this cool thing." So he pops open the crate, and inside we've got the immortal heart of Frankenstein just floating in this jar, basically still beating.
I imagine that he probably got the download from the Nazis who dropped off the crate, but the fact that he goes into so much detail about like Frankenstein's history, and he's just laying everything out there for all of his coworkers and the other doctors that are working under him. It's just so wild to think about that this is not just fictional, but it's well known science fact at this point.
Yeah, it kind of, like we've been saying, this kind of acts as like the previously on, even though this is Like it's sort of like nodding back to these movies that it's not directly connected to, but sort of also still is. And he kind of reveals that the plan is that they're going to try to use this immortal heart to like figure out a way to make immortal soldiers, basically.
Yeah.
They're going to try to use like the DNA. I don't think they use the word DNA, but like that's kind of the implication.
Yeah. So this would be the first time someone that has actually tried to weaponize the Frankenstein monster.
Oh yes.
In film.
Yeah, beyond like, Igor just being like, hey, go kill this guy. Like this is a much greater degree.
This is the mass production scale Frankenstein operation here.
But then things get the plans don't go the way they hope because a nuke is dropped.
It's August 6th, 1945.
And yeah, it's a weird, like, it just kind of like has this weird sort of like little commemorative scene where you see the mushroom cloud and like the like title on the screen that shows the date and everything. Like it takes you out of the movie for a second and is just like, hey, just so you know, this like it feels like a little like PSA almost. Like this happened and we need to like acknowledge that so that we can move forward with the story.
Yeah. And I think it does what it's supposed to.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's really effective. I mean, I think that's the thing about, like, that's why, the Godzilla movies have existed for so long, is that it started out so strong like that, because Honda has a way of taking something very fantastical and making a very serious point about it in a way that doesn't feel too heavy-handed, but, like, is not subtle either.
Right. Something like Hayao Miyazaki would do a few decades later, but maybe not as subtle in some cases, but yeah.
Yeah. So then we get like a 15 years later screen, and now we're at a new hospital, and this one is specifically for people with radiation afflictions. So obviously this hospital is, a response to, what happened in Hiroshima.
Right. And imagine living in a place that had been effectively destroyed, completely wiped off the face of the earth, just 15 years after the fact.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable. We were talking about the 20 years between when the movie was made and when these events took place. Right. And I mean, like, if you think about it in our times, like, this is like, 9/11 or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like how much that still shapes so much that we deal with every day today.
Right, but to a much grander scale, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like, 2 buildings, while a tragedy is nothing compared to an entire city. Yeah, and 2 entire cities, honestly. Yeah. Yeah, so we've got this hospital, and you've got 3 doctors. You've got Nick Adams is as you were talking about. He's Dr. James Bowen. He's an American, and then you have Dr. Tagami and
Dr. Kawaji.
Kawaji, yes.
Yeah. By the way, played by Tadao Takashima, who also was in several other Godzilla movies, as well as King Kong versus Godzilla, Atragon, and then after this he would be in Son of Godzilla and Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2. So, I mean, we've been noticing that with the Universal movies, like the stock players, and there's definitely the same thing in Toho. Mm-hmm. Dr. Tagami is Kumi Mizuno, and she was also in a bunch of Godzilla movies. Invasion of the Astro Monster. She'll be in the next one, the War of the Gargantuas, that we'll be talking about. Mm-hmm. And Abira, Horror of the Deep. And also Nick Adams, the American, he was in Invasion of the Astro Monsters as well. Right. And he kind of has a weird deal where, like, he's an American. Like, he's the only, like, white guy in this movie. And they just... When they shot all of his scenes, he just spoke English. And then... So, like, I know a lot of people argue about, like, subs versus dubs and everything. But, like, there's not really a pure version of this movie because the Japanese version has his lines dubbed over by a Japanese speaker, and then the American version has, the whole rest of the cast dubbed over by English speakers. Mm-hmm. So there, I guess there's somewhere exists a cut of this where they're all speaking their native languages, but that doesn't exist where you can watch it. Right. But we find out in this hospital with Dr. Bowen that a young lady by the name of Tezuko is apparently dying.
Yeah, so she's got radiation poisoning, and there's kind of like... It kind of sets the stage for the what these doctors are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. I think we have a few more conversations as the movie goes on about, like, why they are doing the work they're doing, but, like, here there's like a face to the radiation sickness. Like
Right.
we're mostly going to be spending time with these doctors, but they want to show you like, yes, real people were really affected by this and, did not make it.
Yeah, I believe they even talk about how her family was effectively killed in the initial explosion for the most part. And she suffered the fallout.
And like they talk about that, it's like they're like, oh, did she, she gives Dr. Bowen this embroidered pillow, and like he's showing it to Kawaji, and he's like, oh, did she die? And he's like, no, she's still here. And Dr. Tagami's like, it'd be better if she would. Like, she's just suffering. She's dying. It's just very slow and very painful.
Yeah, but once again, the whole kind of like the theme or the thesis of the radiotherapeutics hospital that they're in is that they're trying to turn this massive negative into a positive and eventually help mankind in, cancer researches, ways to help with radiation poisoning and things like that.
Yeah. So they have this conversation about her, and then we cut to like later on that evening, Dr. Tagami's walking home at night, and you get this sort of like close up on these like eyes. There's just kind of like looks a little off, so it's such an extreme close up you don't really even see the whole face, but like it doesn't, there's definitely something strange about what you're seeing. And then you just see this like shadowy figure run away, and this like shopkeeper run out and talk to Tagami, and he's like, did you see that guy just killed our dog? Like, we think he's gonna eat it. So that's like a real quick scene. And then like the next day there's sort of like an echo of that scene where we get a bunch of kids running into a school, and they find like a seriously mangled rabbit, just like blood everywhere, and they all like run back out of the classroom screaming.
Anthony, can I stop you real quick?
Yeah.
What I really want you to do, this is for editing, Anthony, mostly. Please add the soundbite where they go, yay! Because that definitely sounds like everything from Five Nights at Freddy's and a bunch of other like video game, the video game, yay! Noise. It's so good. Okay. But yeah. So the kids discover the rabbit is torn apart, and of course they freak out and run off.
So like we don't really know, there's just kind of like little breadcrumbs, I guess, like leading us to, something weird's going on in this town, outside of the, the radiation sickness that we are aware of. There's something strange in the background that we're not yet privy to, which we'll see, we'll get a little bit more of that very soon. So the next scene is Dr. Bowen bringing flowers to Dr. Tagami for her birthday, and they sit down and eat dinner. And so I actually watched the American cut of this as well, just to like see the differences. And they're basically the same. There's only like one or two scenes that are like removed or edited much at all. And for some reason, this scene is cut way shorter. So there's like this whole conversation they have about like the difference between American and Japanese humor, where he asks her how she makes the soup, and she like tells him step one, and he's like, oh no, that's step two. Step one is
catching the duck.
Yeah. So like it's not a very good joke, but but they kind of have this conversation about it, and that whole conversation is gone from the American version. But then there's a callback later in the movie that is still in the American version and makes no sense by itself.
That's amazing.
But yeah, so they kind of have dinner, and then you get like the this is where you get more about what's going on, or like why they're doing the work they're doing. Right. Dr. Bowen talks about like, as being an American, and that, he kind of feels a sense of like responsibility for what America did to Japan, and that like he wants to put goodness out into the world. So he's losing hope, but like he wants to, like that's his sort of like life's goal, is to sort of do what he can to repair that damage.
Yeah, but he's even contemplating just kind of calling it quits, going back to America and starting over.
Yeah, which is understandable. I mean, like one man is not going to undo,
exactly.
the work of an A-bomb.
Right. Now, do they ever actually, I don't remember them actually saying that Tagami and Bowen are dating, but it really, I mean, they're dating.
Yeah, it's never outright said, but yeah, I mean, like he comes over and brings her flowers, and they have dinner together. So it's, there's definitely the implication there.
Yeah. But then at the end of their meal, they find out, or a taxi starts honking and torn. Turns out it hit a kid that was just running across the road.
Yeah, and like the taxi driver like gets out, and the kid's like laying over to the side, and so he just like jumps back in the car and like speeds off.
Right, he's like, I don't want to deal with this. Just a hit and run.
Yeah, but the kid kind of seems unhurt. Like, he kind of gets up and, like, he's
shrugs it
acting.
off.
Yeah, he's like kind of acting feral though. He's kind of like down, like on like his haunches. Like a little like wolf boy or something. So like Dr. Tagami like throws some food out the window.
Right, like a bag of soup.
Yeah. And he doesn't really respond, so they like pull the curtains closed so that he doesn't think they're watching him. And then he does like kind of scurry over and like take the food.
Yeah, so at that we then skip again to the hospital.
Yeah, this section here is the part that is out of the American one for some reason. Tagami and Bowen have this conversation about the anniversary of the death of a patient.
Right, so we've literally skipped an entire year.
Yeah.
Just over, right.
So yeah, this is the girl who we talked about earlier that had given the pillow and everything. She's now dead, and it's the anniversary of her death, so they're going to go visit her grave.
Yeah, and there are a couple weird time skips like that.
That probably is why the American one cut it, because it probably just kind of made things a little bit more confusing than it needed to be.
Yeah, there's going to be another one not coming up immediately, but going ahead, there'll be another time skip that's kind of like, wait, did that happen? What happened?
Yeah.
Then, okay.
So they discuss going. They're at the hospital. Then cut to them at this like beautiful Buddhist temple, and then they like walk over to a graveyard and like stand by her grave and everything. And then it's just like a little bit later, they're just like walking on the beach, and that's where the American version picks up. Is just like all that's gone. They're just walking along the beach, and they see a bunch of kids chasing the little feral boy that we've seen a couple of times. So he runs into the cave, and then there's just like a bunch of onlookers that sort of just surround the cave, which like if they're trying not to scare off this like frightened child, like filling up the beach with like hundreds of people like peeking their heads into this cave is probably not the way to do it, but that's what they're doing.
Right. Everyone's just kind of gathering around, and they're contemplating shooting the kid, which is kind of weird, but
Yeah, like he hasn't really done anything as far as they know. Like
he's just a feral kid, that's all.
Yeah, so they ultimately Bowen and Tagami go into the cave, and they manage to sort of like coax him out and get him back to the hospital. And that's like we cut to the hospital, and still he's like surrounded by all these like reporters and like I guess maybe some doctors too. I don't know. There's just like a bunch of people with cameras and like not the optimal way to like get this kid used to society.
Yeah, exactly. Let's just hammer him with all kinds of sensory input, being flashes of light as well as noise. So, everyone responds well to that.
Oh, of course.
But it turns out after they've done some tests on him, that oddly enough, this is a Caucasian kid we're dealing with that's randomly in Japan for no reason.
Yeah, and like they're like maybe his like father a soldier and his mother a sex worker. And they're like, no, he's like 100% white. So then they're like, but it's been like, he's too young to have been from like American. So like, what is his deal? They can't quite figure out. He doesn't really fit in the timeline, but he also has radiations.
Yeah, he's irradiated. He is a irradiated person. And apparently he has some slight resistance to radiation because he's lived in it. And they actually discuss him living in the ruins of the Hiroshima Army Hospital.
Yeah.
And apparently he was sighted there a few times.
Yeah, so like he's definitely like this enigma now. Like he shouldn't have been around when the bombing happened because he's too young, and seems to be unaffected, but he was also in the hospital, so maybe he just picked up the radiation while living in the ruins. Yeah, it's definitely like, the doctors are like kicking up like into science mode. Like they've got some research to do. They've got to figure out what's going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. Then we get a visit from someone from the very beginning of the movie, around where Frankenstein's heart was delivered. I believe it was the captain of the ship.
Yes, yeah. So, is this we see him like at the oil fields first, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. There's a random earthquake, flashing lights, everything's just shaking. Then suddenly we have the head of an unknown monster.
Yeah. So this is we get this like sort of collapsing. There's like earthquake stuff. And then, like you said, depending on what title you're going by, you might have a guess who this is. But yeah, so something strange is going on at the oil fields, and also the former soldier is reading the newspaper and sort of discusses the story about the found feral boy, and is like, you know what? That reminds me of Frankenstein's heart that I dropped off at that very hospital many years ago.
Yeah, that's wild.
So this, I feel like this guy, he's kind of a minor character. I guess he would be like the fourth or fifth character behind the three doctors and Frankenstein.
Right.
But like, he really seems to be like the guy who knows what's up. Like, he kind of just pops in every now and then and is like, oh, hey guys, by the way, here's all the information you need to move forward. And then he just disappears.
It's like not only is he catching up the audience, he's catching up the main characters.
Yeah.
He's kind of like, yeah, let me just recap and get the party going in the right direction.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, then we're back to the hospital, and the doctors are working with the boy, and he's eating and like watching rock and roll on TV,
and he loves it. So even Frankenstein loves rock and roll, apparently.
Yeah, and he's really into it, and then it gets like a little bit too intense, like they're rocking a little too hard, and I think it like freaks him out a little bit, and so he just throws the TV out the window. Because if there's one thing we know about Frankenstein, it's that he loves throwing things out windows.
Yeah, I mean, that's his gimmick, right?
Yeah. I guess Dr. Tagami should be happy that it was the TV and not her.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens. Anyway.
So, but then he does start sort of approaching Dr. Tagami in this sort of like ominous way, and like the music sort of gives you this like vibe that like something bad's about to happen. Dr. Bowen sort of like hits him with a chair and tries to stop him. Like it kind of, there's sort of like a sexual assault vibe happening.
Yeah.
Like it's nothing's happened yet, but you just get this feeling that something bad's about to happen to Tagami. But then it just turns out that she's got a necklace that's shiny, and like it drew his attention, and he just wants her necklace.
Yeah, he just likes shiny things, that's all.
So it kind of, that's going back to like what we've seen over and over again with the creature, that there's like
childlike mentality to it.
Yeah, there's like a childlike wonder to what he wants, but just by virtue of his appearance, people sort of like ascribe like ominous behavior to what he's doing. So he's misunderstood, right away again, like he is in all the movies.
Yeah, then I believe we cut a little bit later, and well, it turns out that the kid's growing really, really fast.
Yeah, which is strange. Like that, that obviously becomes sort of the plot that we get. But like a little bit ago, we were talking about that he seemed younger than he should have been for how long he presumably has been around. But something happens, something changes, and like he goes from like not developing at all to like super development out of nowhere. And yeah, so they're having to keep him in a jail cell because he's just so big that they're kind of nervous about what he might do.
Right.
And in fact, there's Dr. Kawaji has like a conversation with another doctor, not one of our like trio, about like we're not sure what to do with him, and the guy suggests maybe we should put him in the zoo, and Kawaji's like, he's a human. Of course we're not going to put him in the zoo. That's terrible.
And there is a callback to that later on in the movie as well. So
yes. So then this is where we get the submarine soldier / oil field worker shows up at the hospital and is like, so I was reading the news and I thought that I might have this information that might be useful to you, and like he goes into the whole like Frankenstein heart thing. And so they're like, yeah, that's promising. Possibly this boy is Frankenstein, like maybe the heart regrew, with its immortal tissue or whatever, that maybe it has become Frankenstein again.
Right. So let's all go to Frankfurt, Germany, and let's see what's going on there.
So then we get to see the doctor from the beginning of the movie, much older now, and Kawaji talks to him, and it's this whole conversation, like, I don't know, I guess they needed like an excuse or something. This scene just doesn't make much sense. Like the doctor's like, yes, Frankenstein has died many times and come back to life. The heart lives on always though. But this version of Frankenstein apparently has some like lizard-like qualities, and you can chop off limbs and they'll grow back. And also the limb will continue to live on.
Yeah, the only thing you need is protein and a little bit of electricity, and that'll keep him going. Yeah,
and so this doctor is like, the best way to test to see if this is Frankenstein or not is chop off some limbs. If they grow, it's like the old like witch trials thing. It's
right.
like if the limbs grow back, you got Frankenstein, and if not, like,
well, you've just cut off a kid's leg or arm or what have you. By the way, the doctor is clearly speaking English. The lips match up to the subtitles. There's no Japanese involved, going back to that thing we mentioned earlier on where everyone was basically speaking their own native languages. Yeah.
So then we get, like, Kawaji, like, talking to the other doctors. Like, he was by himself with Dr. Risendorf, but he's, like, telling them the whole, story now.
Right.
And they're, like, Bowen is like, that Dr. Tagami is not going to be down with this plan.
Yeah.
And then she pops up and is like, definitely not down with this plan. We're not cutting up this kid.
Exactly. But then we move on to our new and much larger friend, Frankenstein Jr. or the monster. They have a little bit of a bad green screen where the people bring him in some food and he scarfs it down hungrily.
Yeah, so like they're definitely they're doing the like, size different stuff.
Exactly.
And like this for some reason this scene definitely there's like an outline.
Right.
There are other scenes in the movie that look much better, but this one does just look a little off.
Yeah. It's weird because I guess it's because it's like almost black on top of black to a degree, but it's clear at that point where the cutout is.
Yeah.
So it's really odd. Yeah, but apparently also the chains are cutting into Frankenstein, or the monster. I'm sorry. They call him Frankenstein. Let's just move past that point. Officially in this movie, his name is Frankenstein.
Yeah.
But the chains are cutting into his wrist, which will be a plot point later. But he's growing so fast that they can't keep up with him at this time.
Yeah. And then we get Dr. Bowen and Dr. Tagami are having dinner again. And Dr. Bowen is like, doing the American thing. So he's like grilling up burgers. And Kawaji was supposed to meet them for dinner. So this wasn't a date, but he's late. So it is just the two of them. Mm-hmm. And this is where you get the callback to the joke. Because like she asks him how he makes the burgers. And,
you've got to start with good meat, right?
Yeah, and she's like, no, first you have to raise the cattle or whatever, and so that line is still in the American version.
Yeah, that's an interesting joke. I don't know how that's American humor specifically, but all right, we'll go with it.
Yeah. So then it turns out that the reason that Kawaji is late is that he's got plans that he's going to try to cut off a limb.
He's just decided on his own he's going to cut off some of the kids' limbs. That's fine, right?
Yeah. So he's there, and like I think he was trying to do it sneaky, but instantly like a whole camera crew shows up, like, and they're like, "We're here to document the test."
But I think almost it seems like one of the higher ups in the hospital told them that Kawaji's going to do this. Like it almost feels that way because just at the moment he's getting ready to start the procedure, that's when they all come busting in and say, "Hey." The higher ups basically told us we could be here. So we're going to watch whatever you're doing.
And of course, as we've been talking about, like these crowds and, bright lights and everything.
Yeah.
It, freaks the kid out and he breaks free. And like at this part, like the effects look a little better. I guess maybe there's a little bit more dynamic movement and the camera moves around and you don't see the seams quite so much.
Right.
But yeah, he like breaks down the bars of the jail and escapes, and you see him kind of like fleeing through the city, and immediately of course then Bowen and Tagami get a call that he's escaped, and Bowen decides to go help but insists that Tagami stay.
Right, even though Tagami has been one of the people that have reliably calmed him down. No, you have to stay here for the most part.
Yeah, and we get a lot of this in movies still, but like especially back then where it's like the men like have to sideline the women because and in this case, like you said, it's especially dumb because she's the one most likely to be able to get this kid under control again. But no, we got to protect the damsel in distress, so we leave her in the apartment and Dr. Bowen takes off to go help.
Right, that's when everyone comes up with the bright idea. Wait a second. Let's use fire extinguishers to blind this kid. Let's make everything better by doing that.
Yeah, which I guess they didn't know about how things go when you blind Frankenstein.
Right,
Yeah, so he's like breaks through a wall and is like running, and the police are shooting him, and it doesn't seem to be affecting him much. And then we get like a classic sort of like King Kong moment where Tagami is in her apartment listening to the news on the radio, and the creature Frankenstein, the boy, walks past her window, and like his head's like, she's up, in a higher level of this apartment complex.
Yeah, I would say at this point he's at least 25 feet tall, right? Yeah. So he somehow snuck through the entire city to get to Tagami's apartment, and was able to just kind of sneak up on her.
Yeah. And so he just kind of peeks in the window and then, like, runs off to hide.
Mm-hmm. She does try to stall him for a bit, but he's
she kind of, it's like the King Kong moment where, like, you've got, like, Fay Ray in the apartment, like, and having his attention or whatever. But yeah, it doesn't last long. He takes off, and then we go back to where he escaped from, and the police are investigating, and they find that the way he was able, which again, I think this is more just to be a plot point. They find that the way he was able to escape is that he tore his hand off, or his hand came off from the pressure of the cuffs or whatever.
Well, initially that's not what they're thinking. They go in and they're like, "Oh, how did he get free?" Well, clearly he slid his hands out of this regular size or these slightly enlarged cuffs, because they're able to move their hands through freely. And it's like, well, no, because he was also 15 feet tall at that point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the leap in logic. It's funny, but yeah.
Yeah, and so, but then they end up finding that his hand is like, doing like, Thing from the Addams Family and just crawling around on the floor. Which to me, like, if he tore down the jail bars to escape, I think he probably could have broken the chain on the cuffs.
Right, yeah.
And wouldn't have needed to remove his hand, but, whatever.
Right, and honestly, that's what I thought he did, but apparently not. I missed that part, so that was pretty...
Yeah, like, when I went back and watched the American version, I kind of was, like, looking specifically at that scene, and, like, you never see it come off, but, like, after you do, his hand is sort of like obscured, like they kind of like keep it out of the shot,
right?
So that you don't see.
And later on, there is kind of a reveal of his hand at that point. So
yeah, but so like, I mean, I think really they needed an excuse for his hand to come off, basically, so that we could see that the hand was still alive, and then we could also see that the hand grows back.
Exactly.
So this is a way for them to do the test without doing the test.
Exactly. They get to be the good guys still without having to get their hands dirty.
Exactly.
Yep. So, at this point, officially, they just went ahead and just start calling him Frankenstein. It's been alluded to that he is the Frankenstein monster, but no, now he is just Frankenstein. It's official. And they put out the All Points Bulletin, and he discovers a hog farm.
Yeah, they get a call that 5 hogs were killed at a farm in Okayama, so they're like, that's got to be him, because they know he needs protein to exist.
And regenerate,
Yeah.
Now, one thing that I did find interesting, so they do kind of a few shots of Okayama, and one of them is actually on a statue of Momotaro, who's a Japanese folk hero. And it's kind of weird because, in a way, Momotaro is kind of the opposite of Frankenstein in that he was desired by his parents. His parents literally wished for him. He came to the world in a peach that they broke him out of. It's kind of like an artificial human to that degree. But because his parents loved him, he grew up to become a hero. Now, don't get me wrong. This may not have been the intention, and I'm reading into this because I tend to do that. But I thought that was kind of an interesting fact that they actually lingered on the statue of Momotaro for a little bit.
Yeah, I did not know that, but knowing that, like, this is, Ishiro Honda and not, like, the House of Dracula when things are getting sloppy or whatever, like, right. I bet that was on purpose, so that's really, really cool. That's an interesting fact.
That was something I was like, wait a second, I know that statue.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So then we kind of, like, we get a lot of, like, quick sort of scenes where there's, like, police are sort of arriving in the area. They're warning people that the creature's on the loose, that he's getting bigger. And then we get the scientists. They're working on the hand. They're like, keeping it alive. They've got it in like a bath, sort of similar to what the heart was floating in before. And then we get this scene of Himeji Castle, where there's like cleaning ladies, and they go into this room or this like sort of
like a stall almost, right?
Yeah, and there's just like I guess it's a like an animal pen basically, and they just find like a full skeleton, like a cow skeleton, I think.
Yeah, bull.
Yeah, so clearly like the hogs weren't enough,
right?
And
he's moved on to bigger prey, right?
Yeah. So then we get the doctors showing up at the Osaka police station to kind of sort of give them sort of a rundown of what they know and what's going on, sort of help the police out with their job.
Yeah, and it seems like Kawaji is now on the fence. He's like, I mean, I don't want to kill it because of science, and we kind of have this hand, but maybe we should kill it.
Yeah, like the police are definitely like on the side of like, we need to kill this. It's a danger, and yeah, he's like, well, if you can let him live, we could probably study him. But if you kill him, like, it's cool. We have the hand, so we're fine. Like, we don't really need him.
Yeah, but Bowen's like, no. We want to keep him alive too. That way we can make sure, we do all the studying and tests that we need to run, and he can help the world out as long as he exists. Once again, that kind of maybe intentionally or unintentionally shows the allure of the Frankenstein monster. Just the fact that people of science are constantly drawn to this forbidden knowledge.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Whether they mean good or ill for the world. And
so then the next scene feels completely like disconnected from the rest of the movie. I feel like it doesn't really serve a purpose, but it's there's like a boat party with like lots of rock music and teens dancing, and Frankenstein sort of like rises out of the water, Godzilla style, walks over to the boat, scares some people, kind of shakes the boat for a second,
just pushes it off.
And then just like sinks back into the water, and that's it. Like I feel like maybe they needed something to make him look a little bit scarier, and there's definitely like with the other rock and roll scene, like I feel like they're trying to appeal to the youths, so you gotta get some more rock music in this. Yeah,
that's kind of actually when he reveals that his left hand is regenerating at this point, because it's much smaller than the other hand, and it's a little gnarled and it's curled up at this point.
Oh yeah. So that would be another sort of like point for this scene to exist.
Right, but also, to be fair, they kind of do the same thing later, so, Yeah.
So then we get back, the doctors, they're back at their home hospital continuing their research, or going to continue their research, except that, oh no, the hand has escaped.
Right, and it doesn't take long for them to find it. Apparently the hand has decided that it wanted to go into the grates. In the lab.
Yeah, it just crawls into a vent and dies.
It literally just crawls into a vent and dies. Why did it die? It doesn't have enough protein to eat. That's why it died. I do like that they pointed that out.
Yeah. So yeah, then we get like we're back to the area where we believe the creature is currently hiding, and you have like the army shows up, and there's tanks, and you get more of that like overlay map footage. And this is sort of the first point, like I had known but sort of forgotten that like Akira Ifukube did the soundtrack to this, and of course he's the person behind the iconic like Godzilla theme and a lot of these earlier movies. And in fact, I think they kind of reuse some of the lesser themes from some of the earlier kaiju movies. Yeah. But he has like a way of like, he has this really jaunty music that he uses for army footage for some reason. And it always feels like a little... It kind of doesn't match, but it also, I don't know, it sets a kind of a fun tone for army scenes. So as soon as that came up, I was like, oh yeah, that's got to be Akira Ifukube.
It's kind of like the March of the Green Berets, whenever American soldiers are in movies in like the 80s and 70s, and it's supposed to be playful and not too serious at this point. Maybe downplaying their threat to upsell Frankenstein's threat.
Yeah, they definitely want you to be on the side of the army.
Right. But yeah, so at this point, the Frankenstein monster is hunting a seagull with a tree. He pulls a tree out of the ground and lobs it at the seagull. I mean, it wasn't a particularly big seagull, but it was making kind of like the maybe almost Godzilla noises, but maybe a little bit of Rodan in there. Maybe that's a callback. But of course, the tree misses its mark and destroys a woodcutter's shack instead.
Yeah. And seeing this scene today made me think of like, in Godzilla versus Kong that just recently came out, that's sort of like how Kong escaped, or sort of starts trying to escape the dome on Skull Island as he like yanks trees out of the ground and like just chucks them like spears.
Right, 100%. But of course, our friend Frankenstein discovers a very interesting miniature warthog. I mean, it's a full size warthog according to the movie, but the miniature is amazing. It's just a little toy that they move up and down, I think, with a string, or was it a stick?
Yeah. So, I mean, all of these kaiju movies, like, one of the things they're sort of, like, known for is, like, intricate miniature work to make the monsters look big. But when you see this hog, and then later I think you see some horses, and you discover that, boy, miniatures sure work better when it's just, like, solid buildings and maybe some, like, vehicles that can be remote controlled. But when you start messing with living things, they don't look so great.
Exactly. No, the miniature work, don't get me wrong, that's really good as far as the buildings and the vehicles are concerned. That's top notch. Is the massive ship that the Frankenstein monster just pushed out of the way earlier on. I mean, it looked like a real ship, and I'm sure they rotoscoped some people into the lights to make it even look more so. Yeah.
I mean, it looks good, but yeah, just like
the living
having that, like,
is not good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But he's trying to hunt it. He like digs a little hole and puts a bunch of like tree branches over it.
Could you imagine how big that trap? Well, we will find out how big that hole is in a bit. But
yeah,
the fact that he's just sitting there, just scooping like all of this earth and laying down trees effectively to cover it was pretty good. I mean,
when he throws the tree earlier, like he's taller than the trees. So I mean, like those are some big hands scooping that dirt out. And yeah, pretty much we find out right away, because then we see like the army sort of arrive in this village. You see a bunch of tanks, and they just like go up into the hills, and instantly one of those tanks finds the boar trap and
falls right into it.
Big enough. Yeah, he catches a whole tank in that trap.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, he wasn't planning on eating it, so that was kind of a waste.
No good protein in a tank.
Yeah, I guess not. Oh, a lot of iron. Hey! I derailed this podcast.
Oh, that was perfect.
Thank you. All right. But, yeah, apparently they discover Kawaji and Bowen and Tagami are discussing kind of, at this point we move on to them, and they're discussing the climate that maybe the Frankenstein is looking for. And
they're kind of trying to like do some detective work and figure out where he would most likely go based on, science, basically. Right. Like they're just like, he seems like he probably prefers a colder climate, but he needs to go to warm areas to get protein, so we need to find something that sort of straddles those two areas.
Yeah, they figure it's about halfway up Mount Fuji.
Yeah. So then we get a third instance of rock and roll, and we get this like dance club. It's got a bunch of.
It's like a dance club, but it's also like a campground, because there's a bunch of huts around it.
Yeah, it's strange. Like I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know. And it has a sign. I can't remember what it says, but it's just like the name of the place. It's like a neon sign out front.
Yeah, it's like Sheena's Huts or something like that.
Yeah, so you just get a bunch of like teens doing the twist kind of thing. But then the ground starts shaking, and this is where the ground bursts open, and we get a clearer picture of the creature that was earlier seen at the oil fields. And it's Baragon, the sort of strange, I don't know what he's, like a lot of the Godzilla kaiju type creatures have some sort of correlation to like some real animal, but this, I don't know what Baragon's supposed to be. Like he's got weird floppy ears.
I have an idea, and I'm not trying to make fun of Baragon, because I'm sure if Baragon existed, I would be terrified of an actual Baragon. But it's like a dog mixed with an armadillo.
Yeah. He's got like a weird
ears.
glowing horn on his nose, but yeah, he's got floppy like puppy ears.
Puppy face.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the more silly kaiju.
But also, whenever he's actually doing stuff, he is kind of terrifying as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, like he's bursting through the ground, like he's causing earthquakes.
Right, but his the direct shots of his face are they're precious, is what they are. They're adorable.
Yeah, exactly.
They really are. But no, apparently no one survived. No, everyone's missing that was at the party.
Yeah, and so we get this when he like breaks into the dance club. That's what you get, like people running and screaming. You get some of the like, you know, the requisite like kaiju composite shots where the monster's real big in the background. And you got people, you know, waving their hands and running through the foreground. You know, you need that scene in a kaiju movie. But then, yeah, like you said, then the next day we've got like the army and our trio of doctors looking at the wreckage, and like, yeah, no survivors, no one to identify what happened there. So, you know, the army is like, this clearly was Frankenstein, like something giant stomped through here and killed everybody. And the doctors are kind of like, you know, they're skeptical.
Right. Yeah. Didn't exactly match his MO.
Yeah. Cause I think this is where they even talk about the, like, you know, Frankenstein doesn't eat people. Like he needs protein, but he's not a cannibal.
Right. He just eats animals.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then we get like, some miners, they're like investigating a mine collapse nearby, and they see Baragon.
Right. Yeah, they definitely do. And they see the horn most prominently of all.
Yeah. So he's got that good glowing horn because he's the underground dweller. So he needs like a light to see where he's going. So then we get the doctors. They spend a lot of the rest of the movie in a helicopter, just like flying around,
literally dropping off food. In this case, the Shirane tunnel is where they've been kind of putting their food around for Frankenstein. But I guess it's been drawing Baragon in.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they literally just chuck packages of food outside of the chopper. It's pretty good.
Yeah. And then we go to a farm where we see Baragon attacking the farm, and you know he is trying to eat the animals, and this is where we see the bad miniature horses.
Right. We have actual chickens and then miniature horse. Yeah,
and the horses, I mean, they look like a kid's farm playset. Like they're just little toy horses that, they don't look great.
It almost looked like somebody just ran down to the store hobby shop and just picked up a horse right off the shelf. I mean, I'm sure they probably did spend hours painting this thing, and not to come down on them hard or anything like that. This is all in good fun, but it is not the best looking miniature horse.
Then we get like these kids arrive home and they see their crushed house and they're like looking for their parents, and they end up in a quarry cave nearby, and they see Frankenstein there. And then we just immediately cut to like the doctors arriving there to investigate, and the army's there. And of course, you know, the army doing army things, they immediately take to just shooting at Frankenstein, which doesn't go well.
No.
He gets angry and sort of like rushes them, and they sort of like, everybody flees the cave, including Frankenstein, who then like escapes.
Yeah, runs off into the woods.
Yeah, but so now we've got this instance where we know, you know, we have this crushed farm, and we know Baragon did it, but right next to the crushed farm, we find Frankenstein in a cave. So now everybody's sort of like, okay, I guess Frankenstein did do this.
Right, he's gone cannibal now.
Yeah, so he's sort of gotten like inadvertently framed for this. And yeah, everybody's pretty much on board with that. And then we have our guy again, the submarine. I keep wanting to just say submarine soldier. I don't like a seaman, I guess. I don't know.
Captain?
Yeah, but the submarine guy and / oil field worker shows up again and is like, so I was doing a little bit more research, and I think there might be another monster, because during the earthquake, I saw this glowing light at the oil field. And does Frankenstein like have any glowing bits on him? Does his eyes shoot lasers or anything?
Well,
and
of course not. That's preposterous, right?
So he's like, yeah, then I think there might be another culprit that you all need to look out for.
Right. And then they go on this kind of like a little tour of several science and reporter offices, trying to convince them that Frankenstein's not doing this. There's got to be another monster involved. And
it doesn't really get much traction. Like they talked, it's like a journalist and then like
a scientist,
just a scientist, and then like a
museum
dinosaur
curator.
expert. Yeah. and he's like looking at dinosaur drawings, and he's like, no, I don't think this matches up. So everybody's kind of like, technically it might be possible, but it's very, very unlikely that there's a giant dinosaur crawling around underground crushing things.
Right. That's just silly now that we have 100-foot tall human running around Japan.
So then we get another scene, the same thing again, of like the doctor's up in a chopper throwing food down. I think this is where they talk about that they're like running out of money and that like they need to do something soon because renting this helicopter all the time is costing a lot of money.
Yeah, they're like the hotel or the place we're staying, we're running out of money, so we need to wrap this up ASAP.
Yeah, and so then Frankenstein does find the food they've dropped and carries it to the cave.
Now he's in full caveman mode. At this point, his clothes have deteriorated. He's in the like kind of toga, the fur toga, to a degree.
Yeah, he definitely has a caveman look to him too. Like he does have a little bit of the Frankenstein flat top that we're used to, but yeah, there's definitely some like Neanderthal qualities to him as well.
Yeah, I mean he's developed a lot of weird hair growth in the time.
Oh yeah. So then we get, I guess the doctors, you don't really see Frankenstein or see the food missing, but suddenly they're exploring the area on foot. So either they've like tracked something down, or maybe they just ran out of money and had to give up the helicopter, and they're just continuing on foot. But yeah, at this point, Kawaji's like, I think probably we need to kill Frankenstein. I don't think...
Right, yeah, he's fully shifted. Kill Frankenstein, preserve the heart, then we're done.
And he has a plan to do this, because he's like, if we let the army do it, there may not be any specimens left. So we got to take care of this. And he like sort of walks over to this like indentation in the ground. Like, I don't know if it's like a pit or just like a hill that's dipped down or whatever. And he just like chucks some dynamite off into the distance.
I mean, yeah, that blew my mind. It's like, he just has like, are these supposed to be flashbangs because he's trying to blind Frankenstein, but also they make loud explosions, so they're clearly dynamite. So
and like we don't even see Frankenstein. Like it's not like he's throwing it at the monster. He's just throwing it.
Right.
And as luck would have it, Frankenstein's not around, but
Baragon is, and he's pissed.
So yeah, Baragon like kind of rushes at them, and they're like, then you've got Kawaji and Bowen, and they're both throwing these like packs of explosives. But he just keeps coming. Like he's not slowed down at all by all these explosions.
No, not at all. But of course, then we have our friend Frankenstein hopping in to start the fight proper, and we discover that Baragon has some amazing jumping skills.
I put Baragon is surprisingly aerial for an underground dweller.
I mean, he literally. How far would you say that would be? At least 2 football fields, right?
Oh yeah,
easy. Maybe 3.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. And yeah, so then this is obviously why we're all here is the kaiju fight. And it's interesting because if you've seen a lot of previous kaiju movies, it's usually like 2 people in monster suits fighting. And this has a very different feel because Frankenstein is basically just a man. He's got some makeup and stuff, but he's not in a suit the way that the person inside Baragon is, or all of the other creatures in previous films.
But because of that, he's like 10 times more agile. He's able to...
Yeah, it gives it a whole different sort of choreography.
I'm actually surprised this didn't take off more, and there wasn't more of this. Yeah. People with light suits. I mean, eventually we will get things like Super Sentai, but those are once again still very bulky in the vein of kaiju, and they're effectively kaiju fights.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the only other, the War of the Gargantuas, they're pretty, not too bulky. Right. And then the only other thing I can think of is like Jet Jaguar, who is still like a full robot, but it's kind of a guy in a... Oh, right, yeah. Ultraman would be very similar kind of thing where it's like a giant robot that is basically like a person in like a silver spacesuit.
Right, exactly. But I will say, though, that with like Jet Jaguar and Ultraman, there was a lot of weight to all of their movements. They still made them look weighty, heavy, slow. No, it's like this version of Frankenstein is just a massive person that's rolling and jumping, and like it seems like he would be even faster than them. But once again, that's because he's a regular guy in a suit versus an actual or regular guy without a suit versus being, in the suits like they are. Even
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that the thing with like a lot of times they would like slow down or they would film at a higher rate of speed so that when they played it, it would just slowing it down slightly does give everything a weight and like the movement looks heavier. But yeah, they didn't do that in this. So yeah, it does. He's kind of like moving at this like crazy speed compared to Baragon.
Right. And he does seem more agile, but then again, that's probably because they didn't add the sound of him stomping across the world as he probably should be. So once again, he seems lighter on his feet than he should, and versus most of the incarnations of Frankenstein we think of where he's big and lumbering. In this version, he seems very agile, very quick.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And so then we get like, I think Baragon sort of burrows down like he's going to escape, and you get some scenes of like people fleeing. Oh, and then we get Kawaji is like injured, and Frankenstein like picks up his body and like carries him and sets him down next to his two associates. So even though Kawaji was like prepared to kill Frankenstein, Frankenstein rescues him when he's like, at his most vulnerable moment.
Right, and that just adds a little bit of the humanity to him. Makes him seem, he is just a person, a kind of a massive lost kid, as he's always been.
Yes, exactly. And then Baragon comes back, and then pretty much the rest of the movie is like nothing but kaiju fight. So like Baragon starts like, he's got like a heat ray kind of thing, and Frankenstein is throwing rocks
and trees,
and so they're doing flips and stuff, and he like throwing each other around, and then Frankenstein gets two torches, which I think are just whole trees that he's set fire to, and tries to attack Baragon with that, and ends up setting the forest on fire.
Exactly, and then everything starts catching. But, we have a little bit of them rolling around, grappling each other. But it looks like Frankenstein gets the upper hand on Baragon. He wraps his arm around his neck. And I may have missed this, but it looks like he pulled off his skull, like the top of his skull, just opened it up to kill him.
Yeah, it is hard because it looks like he's just kind of like choking him. But then he does do something. Like, I don't know if he's like breaking that armor or... Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of hard to see.
There's like a little flap that he's just pulling up on. And then, of course, Baragon goes limp.
And the horn light goes dim.
Exactly. So we know that Frankenstein has won this fight. But wait, the movie ain't over yet.
So yeah, if you saw this in the theaters originally, the movie basically is over. And Frankenstein and Baragon both sort of just sink into the earth together. And then you get a scene of the people being like, well, Frankenstein probably can't die, so we probably haven't seen the last of him. The end. But in this case, no, he like picks up Baragon, throws Baragon into like a hole in the earth.
Because that's his thing. He picks things up and throws them. Yep.
And then out of nowhere,
giant octopus.
Yeah, so this giant octopus shows up, and it actually looks pretty cool. Like, it's like puppeted, like it's not a person in a suit. It's like on, there's probably a lot of people like off screen pulling, wires and stuff to make it sort of the tentacles move around and stuff. But it actually like looks pretty good, and Frankenstein fights it, and like the tentacles are wrapping around it and stuff. And so the deal with this scene is that the American producer
Benedict Pictures,
Saperstein, I think Henry Saperstein. But yeah, the of AIP, he wanted this scene because he really liked the giant octopus scene in King Kong versus Godzilla.
Right.
Which that scene is just an actual real octopus crawling over miniatures, and they use like air guns to just like blast air at it to make it to aim where the octopus moved.
Right.
And that scene, like the funny thing about that scene, it looks really great because it's a real octopus. And then after the movie was over, they cooked and ate it.
Oh no.
Because Japan.
Right. Well, they're not going to do it with this one because this one's a miniature. So or not a mannequin,
Yes.
model, a puppet.
Yeah, so I guess Saperstein like wanted the same thing, and then they filmed the whole thing, and then when he saw it, he was like, "Nah, that looks silly."
Right.
So they didn't use it, but then later it was like one of those like sought after deleted scenes, and they added it back at some point.
I believe he
so yeah,
cited it
depending-
as too abrupt, which, yeah, I mean, yes.
Yeah, it does come out of nowhere, but it actually, I mean, like it does sort of, the conclusion that it brings about actually, to me, works a little better. It would make more sense if we had maybe seen it appear earlier in the movie once or twice in some way.
Maybe if
like
it had
maybe
attacked
in that boat scene.
Exactly, if it had attacked that and been fought off or something to that effect.
Yeah. But yeah, so they fight for a little bit, and like they get to a point where like Frankenstein's sort of wrapped up in the octopus and sort of like throws it into the sea, but is still sort of like pulled in with it. And they kind of just like sink under the water together.
Right, and by the way, that the octopus has a name. It's Udako.
Okay.
Udako. Sorry.
I wonder, is it supposed to be the same octopus from the King Kong versus Godzilla?
I don't know if it is, but it might be. It's a thought. But,
Yeah.
But I definitely know we haven't seen the last of it.
Okay. Yeah, so then we get the people on the shore, you know, and you get the like, as we've seen many times before, the bystanders watching after the monsters have died. And they have this sort of conversation where it's like, you know, did Frankenstein die? And it's like, no, of course not. You know, we know Frankenstein can't die. He's definitely going to return someday, but we'd probably be better off if he did die.
Right. which even Bowen eventually comes around to that, and it's like, oh, that's kind of dark. That even the guy who's being hopeful is like, nope, it would have been better if we'd never gotten involved with this guy.
Yeah, but then the end shot of this looks so cool. So it like you have them talking, and then you see the water, and it's like kind of still bubbling, like as if they're still fighting underwater. And then the camera just like slowly pans up to that burning forest,
right?
And then you get the end and like the the kanji characters and stuff, and like it's a really cool ending.
Anthony, do you know what we've just experienced?
What's that?
We are 9 episodes in. We've experienced our first real denouement. It didn't end abruptly. We actually had like some lingering shots. You know, we got to think about it a little bit. We got to, have a little bit of catharsis there, and an actual ending instead of just boom, we're done. Get out of the theater, go home.
Yep, you're not wrong.
I mean, but yeah, that was Frankenstein Conquers the World, or as we mentioned earlier, Frankenstein versus Baragon.
And so, of course, if you're familiar with this movie, you know that there is a sequel that's kind of a strange sequel. It's been a while since I've seen it, so I'm kind of interested to see. So it's War of the Gargantuas, where Frankenstein doesn't really make an appearance, but sort of
kind of
is. Yeah, so it's worth watching, and it's part of, it's a 2-part thing. So we're gonna move on and check out War of the Gargantuas next week.
Oh, I'm so excited! I love that movie.
Yeah, it's a fun one.
Mm-hmm. As always, to be continued.
Looks like you survived another episode. The Frankencast is a production of FCR Media. It's hosted by Anthony Bowman and Eric Velazquez. Follow us on Twitter at The Frankencast, or send us a letter at thefrankencast@gmail.com. Our cover art is by Amanda Keller. You can find her at Keller Illustrations on Instagram. Our theme music is by Vivek Abhishek. Thanks for listening. Looks like you've survived another episode. The Frankencast is a production of FCR Media. It's hosted by Anthony Bowman and Eric Velazquez. Follow us on Twitter at The Frankencast, or send us a letter at thefrankencast@gmail.com. Our cover art is by Amanda Keller. You can find her at Keller Illustrations on Instagram. Our theme music is by Vivek Abhishek. Thanks for listening.